Good evening, MIT alums and friends, and welcome to our inaugural Operating in the New Normal webinar series, starting with Akamai Technologies. My name is Ching Su. I am the Vice President of the MIT Club of Singapore. Today, I'm delighted to introduce Mr. Mani Sundaram, Executive Vice President for Global Services and Support and Chief Information Officer to share Akamai's experience. Welcome, Mani.
Thank you, Chingsu. So when Chingsu invited me for this event, there was no way in which I could say no. And I'm going to open my slides here, but I want to start off by saying the Akamai's connection with MIT goes very deep. Let me just see if I can get these slides up. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, so Akamai's connections actually with MIT are really deep. In fact, our co-founder, Dr. Tom Layden, who is our CEO right now and my boss, was a professor at MIT and is I think an emeritus professor at MIT now for many, many years. And the photo that you can see here is a photo of two of our co-founders. So Tom Layton, who's wearing an overcoat and standing, and next to him is Danny Lewin, who was the inspiration, the force behind Akamai, but unfortunately, tragically passed away on September 11th in 2001 when he was on a plane on his way to Los Angeles. So the connections go really, really deep. Our connections also, if you've come to the MIT campus here, the connections are very deep in the sense that we have been in Kendall Square now since Akamai started in 1998. And we've moved from building to building to building. And now you'll see on the last page, we have a photo of our brand new building, which we just opened in November. So another tragedy here, unfortunately, is we opened our building 4 months later, coronavirus came in, and now none of us are in that building. But it was a really, really excellent building, brand new, 19 stories, with where for the first time Akamai is now in one location, all of us being in the same building. And then along with those, just my introduction here. I'm based out of Boston, so I have the pleasure of walking by MIT every day. I didn't go to MIT though. I went to Northeastern, and then I did my certification at Harvard. And I've been in Boston now for 22 years. So as local as you can get, as native as you can get. I also I grew up in India, came here for graduate studies, as I just mentioned. Been in Akamai now for 13 and a half years. And I started off in services and support as a senior solutions architect. And my first job at Akamai was actually to work with NBC to help design the solution for the Beijing Olympics in 2008. So I could not have asked for a more exciting project to get started in Akamai. And then, my career kind of, just kept going in different ways. I started working on building a professional services practice out of the Northeast. Worked a lot with a lot of the media customers in New York. And then the biggest challenge I had, which kind of brought me to Singapore for some time back and forth, was to build a global professional organization. At that time, professional services was in different parts of the world, reporting into different leaders. And so my job was to build a global organization. So I started off tackling Europe first, and that took me a good part of a year between 2012 and 13. And then in 13 to 14, I started trying to pull together Asia Pacific under single leadership, trying to put together consistent ways of working. And that project got done in 2014-15 timeframe. Couple of years back, I had the opportunity to add to my portfolio the CIO job. Tom came to me and said, "Hey, is that something I was interested in?" And I took it up, not realizing what I was getting myself into, but it was fascinating, completely new areas, a lot to learn. And I'll say that, along those lines, the coronavirus test that we have gone through is another example of how things change, and we all have to be agile in the way we handle things. So that is my background here, and I'm going to move forward. And the agenda for me here was to talk a little bit about what we did, what Akamai did in the last week or so, last couple of months or so, to help our company, help our employees, help our customers deal with coronavirus. And I want to start off by saying, you know, um, since you're based out of Singapore, things are very different in Singapore. Singapore, things happened earlier on, and Singapore did a great job in managing the crisis. As you can probably read in the news, the US did not do such a great job. A lot of the companies, however, I think did a reasonably good job in adapting to the situation for the global workforce. And from where we stood, a lot of the things started unfolding the week of February 24th with the RSA conference. Right, so the RSA conference was the first time we actually heard that there were a bunch of people that were actually sick. Before that, in fact, I was in India in February. It was mostly something that was happening in China, in Singapore, in other parts of Asia, but it really wasn't affecting anybody else in the US or in Europe or other parts of Asia too, Australia and so on. But by the week of February 24th, it became evident that things were here to stay. And then, so we had a bunch of emergency meetings, and one of the meetings we decided to cancel every single event that we had in March. Actually, postpone it because we had no idea when it. We said, okay, April is going to be all okay. Let's just kind of postpone things for 1 month. And then it became a very evident the first week of March. If you've heard about the Biogen story, the Biogen story was where a bunch of Biogen executives had a sales meeting in Boston first week of March, and a few people from Italy flew in, and it ended up essentially having at least 60 to 70 people locally being infected. So that is one of the first examples of these super spreading events where a lot of people got infected. And Biogen is right next to our Akamai building. So that created a sense of nervousness within Akamai. And so by that week, our leadership team met and we said, hey, it probably is realistic that everybody starts working remotely. And at that point in time, we hadn't, we've had about 20-25% of people work remotely before, but having 100% of our employee workforce work remotely was something that was not done or tested or validated in any way. Now, we had a couple of advantages. One of the things that we had was we have our own remote access product, what we call as our enterprise application access product. So we've built our own product, and a lot of our employees were on it. So that actually helped us quite a bit. The other thing that we've actually had as a culture is we've believed in the fact that an Akamai office is for all practical purposes like an internet hotspot, like a Starbucks, like a coffee shop. You go in, but you still have to VPN in to access all to access all your systems. So we didn't have this culture of people coming in and plugging themselves in or connecting within Wi-Fi and getting access to everything. We had enforced an additional check. So when people went home and started working, it was just a logical extension. It just felt as though they were connecting from somewhere else. So that was the other advantage. So almost every day actually had been for us a load test. People coming in, VPNing into us every day was just a load test for us. And but even then, we still had some concerns on some systems. And so we chose the date Friday, May 13th. It was not, unfortunately, Friday the 13th was really a bad day. We really actually thought twice about it. I'm not superstitious, but I did think twice about putting a test on Friday the 13th. But on Friday the 13th, we did ask every person in the company to work remotely. Wherever they were, whichever geography they were, we asked them to work remotely, with the exception of certain employees. And we said, please work from home so that we can test out the systems. And you can see some of the statistics here on the 13th. Pretty much the office completely went to a crawl. We had 40% increase in VPN usage. We had some capacity issues on VPN, which we handled. Our enterprise application access got 8% increase. And literally a lot of the meetings became virtual. And over the course of time, you'll see that pretty much everything became virtual within a span of a week. Okay. And for us, that kind of proved that our company was ready, our people were ready, and a lot of our customers were actually going through the same motions as well in that week. And that basically took us March 16th onwards to be pretty much 99% remote. with the exception of a small category of people that are coming in as what we call as essential services to handle some of our network and our customer needs. All right. Um, the way we thought about the situation was to talk about it in three phases, what we call a stabilize, adapt, and emerge. And the first phase was to have just getting things stable. That was the week of March 26th, March 16th. Just make sure that things were stable. Adapt was the next phase where we talked about how we could actually run the business as usual. We could focus on what we had to do to improve and maintain our customer and employee experience. And then the emerge phase, which is I think where we are right now, is how do we come out of this with a better sense of how things operate? How do we work with a new normal? And so if you take a look at the activities that we did in line with these three different phases, we started off stabilizing. The main job that we had during the stabilize phase was to protect our employees and our customers. And it starts off with what we call as a zero trust model. And I won't go into the zero trust model in detail, but it essentially the philosophy is that you think of every user of your systems as an untrusted user, and the user has to validate and prove that they are certain that they are who they are and they have access to what they should get access. And this is not just through a network or a password, but there's more checks beyond that. Right? We believe in multi-factor authentication. We believe that eventually passwords will go away. And the fact that we've had these own products really helped us a lot. And it was interesting during these times, we actually saw a lot of, especially customers in areas like Italy that were really affected, come to Akamai to get these products, to try to build that zero trust methodology within what they were doing, because they had an opportunity to kind of start fresh. When the other thing which I'll say is, bad actors are there everywhere. And during this time, we also saw a remarkable spike in malware. And I don't know about how it was in Singapore, but I do know, like, for example, that our CEO got malware. And luckily, he didn't click on the links and he forwarded it over to us so that we could check. But there was an attack, there was a spike in malware. We also saw a lot of our customers being attacked at this time because, we were in a situation where there was just too much stress in the system. It was just the fact that there were too many things going on, and executives had 50 other things to worry about. So it became an issue for us in Q1. But then we took a lot of action with our security teams and shared a lot of our best practices with our employees, started training them on what phishing and malware looks like, and that helped us quite a bit. As we moved into adapt, we talked about we started working on three different areas. So even though I'd say Akamai was about 95% ready for remote work, there were areas that we were challenged with. And some areas where, for example, we do a lot of in-person marketing events. How do you replace that with something like this, with Zoom, not just for employees, but also for customers? How do we replicate whiteboarding? Because a lot of Akamai's engineering and product development, how do you replicate whiteboarding in a remote environment? So we started looking for some tools to get that. And then the biggest challenge I felt was, we're continuing to hire at this time. We're continuing to have to provide new equipment to people. Delivering equipment in an area like India, which was under complete lockdown, where you couldn't even get laptops delivered, was a significant challenge. So we had to put logistical hubs in different locations with employees having stacks of laptops that they were configuring. In India, we managed to actually get a truck as an essential service that we could send over within Bangalore to deliver laptops. A little different in the US and Europe and other parts of Asia, but we had to adapt very quickly for things like equipment delivery and so on. And then the most important thing I'll say is still customers. How do you manage to do effective customer support in a completely remote environment? And that is part of what we went through in April as a part of the adapt management. The other things that we did, so the thing that we were very proactive, which got us a lot of employee support, was the fact that just as soon as this crisis hit, we gave all of our employees a $300 allowance, We said, go out there for $300 anywhere in the world, whoever you are, you can buy stuff to make you more productive at home. That included things like, keyboards or monitors or mouse or chairs and things like that. So um, that a lot of employees really, really appreciated that. The fact that they could go out and get this allowance from Akamai as a one-time thing to get themselves settled. We also started thinking about how we can communicate more, communicate better. How can we recognize achievements, things that we would have otherwise done at the office? How do we boost our morale? So we put together a lot of success stories, as you can see here, on how we started doing things, more stuff on our community pages. We also took the opportunity to do um, a lot of videos, short form videos that teams did. So one of the videos that you can see here, the link that I have is what we call as a lip sync battle. So teams lip sync themselves to certain songs, and that became a kind of a friendly competition within the company, so that people could again feel related to their coworkers when we couldn't see them in person. And there were lot of new resources for remote work. So remote work best practices, mental health, just a lot of information on COVID-19 as well. And yes, employees got a lot of this information from all the other locations too. But I think having our human resources team take the lead in providing this to employees and helping employees through this, I think was very well taken by a lot of our employees. And then finally, we go to what we call as our emerge phase. And the emerge phase is, on the left was our office before we went on lockdown, this brand new building. On the right is my new office at home, where now I'm, trying to get everything settled with all my multiple devices here. And that is the new normal. And I think, for the rest of the year, Akamai has given guidance that we will be uh, mostly working from home or working remotely till the end of the year. So I haven't seen the building since I last saw it on March 16th, and I'm hoping that I can go back, sometime. But it is the situation isn't really that great right now, and so we just have to deal with it. I'm really proud of what we have done as a company, as an employee group, and I feel that again we are in a new normal. This just the fact that I'm able to do this is a new normal, and so I'm really appreciative of everything that we're going. We're just fortunate to be in an industry where we can work like this. A lot of us, a lot of other people are not that fortunate. So, with that said, this takes me to the end of my presentation, and obviously open for questions, Jingsu and others.
Thank you, Mani. Um, if I can just start with the first question, Mani. So could you provide a bit more information, if appropriate, about, you mentioned just now, Akamai has provided guidance that, we should work until end of the year remotely and from home, of course, in conjunction with local situations, right?
Yep.
What about travel? How do we support our customers? Stuff like that. And in particular, some of the more critical functions like the 24/7 security and network operating center, how does that work with this new normal?
Got it. So let me hit travel first. So the recommended advice that we kept for travel was to do it on an exception basis, um, and get SVP approval for travel. So I'm totally aware that especially in parts of Asia and maybe some parts of Europe, it's become more normal. I just read that New Zealand and Australia. New Zealand has one case right now, so it's about as normal as you can get. So in some locations, such as Australia, New Zealand, people have started traveling, and that's fine with management approval. So just an exception basis. We want to make sure our employees are safe. And your second question on essential employees. So in March, we started looking at all the different employees and the activities that they were doing. And fundamentally, there were two sets of employees that were absolutely essential and had to come in. And one was our network operations team, where some of the tools and the keys and things like that that they use to manage stuff is actually inside the office. And so in different locations, we did different things. In the US, we got exceptional permission for that team to come in. In India, we actually gave them hotel accommodation within the campus where our office is so that they could stay there and come to the office. The other team that had to come in was our U.S. government team, because a lot of the government networks, you had to be in the office, and so that was the other team that we got an exception to come in. But outside of that, every other team that could support their customers completely remotely. Um, there were other teams like our security operations centers where it was preferable to come in because of the access to screens and data and so on. So we had small groups of people that were coming in. They were classified as essential employees. But the reality was that was also a function that for the most part you could do from home. So we got exceptional permission for about 4 teams. 2 of those teams had to come in. 2 of those teams nice to come in. The rest of the group employee workforce was pretty much remote.
So essentially, the vast majority of Akamai's 7,800 employees is working remotely.
That is correct. So we are about, I think the last statistic I saw was about 98% or 99% of our workforce is working remotely right now.
Wow.
And the other thing, Chingsu, I wanted to add was the fact that even if we are slowly working on an office opening plan, and the office opening plan, clearly some regions are more open than the others. But it looks as though, especially the big offices in US, in Europe, and in India, are not going to be opening anytime soon, given the percentage of cases. But there are offices, I think, probably in Asia, especially in China, in Australia, that I think are closer to opening. And so we're working on that plan as well, in conjunction with local authorities to make sure that there's protections and things like that for employees when they come in.
Thank you, Mani, for the insights. Questions, please.
I have one, James here. In the real estate circles, there are people who say that tech companies, such as Akamai, now that they discovered they don't need the physical office, they're going to permanently work from home. And so they're going to give up, let's say, 80 or 90% of their office space. And then there are people who say, no, people have been working from home for 3 months, but they really dying to get back to the office. But in order to let them get back to the offices have to be renovated, to allow for social distancing, no more of these open, floor plans with people sitting so close to each other. So what do you think is the likely outcome, for a company like Akamai?
So it's a great question. I think the outcome is somewhere in the middle. It's also been heavily debated within the company as well. I don't believe that we can go without face-to-face interaction for a long time. I just don't believe that. I think that you need some of that collaboration in order to make things work. But I also believe that now that we have a new normal where people no longer, I think, will want to spend 2-hour commutes into the office in many parts of the world, I think we're going to see, the notion of people coming in for a couple of days and then working remotely for a couple of days. I think that concept, I think, will become more of a reality. And so I think it leads to 2 things. One is the need for flexible yet secure workspaces. So the ability to put together and block some time in an office where, a meeting can happen, I think is going to be essential. Today, we almost assume that everybody's just going to be there and we can haul people out of their cubes for a meeting. I think it'll become that you have to book and you have to plan a little bit ahead where people come into the office for meetings. The second thing, and I'm talking about the US, I'm not talking about other parts of the world where there's a lot more of a face-to-face culture. Like Japan and Korea, a lot more face-to-face. I don't think that will change too much. But where in the US, at least, I feel that this will happen. I think the second thing that you're going to see is the ability to now tap into talent in different parts of the Americas or different parts of the world. So previously, if I were to hire somebody from, let's say, Kansas in the US, I might have thought twice because they're not near any office and it's hard to get them to come back and forth to have meetings. But now, if everybody is remote, that's more of an opportunity. So if there is a person that I really like who's in Kansas or Arizona or any of these locations that don't have offices, it becomes much more of a reality for us. So we also need to think of not just real estate budget that's saved, but now there's maybe travel budget that we need to plan for getting people to meet, let's say once a month or something along those lines. So we are having those conversations within the company on what the new normal is. And I think places like New York City uh, are legitimately concerned, right? They're legitimately concerned because a lot of New York City thrives on the 2 hour commute. People coming in from New Jersey, Connecticut, and other parts of Long Island to come into Manhattan to work for a day. But then a lot of people are saying, wait, I should do this just to come and sit in a queue for a whole day. Why does that even make sense? Now I have to risk myself on public transport as well. So I think we will see a new normal, but the new normal will be more flexible work arrangements, and open offices and things like that will have to be adapted to to offer protections. I don't know if we'll continue with the open office theme the way it used to be. And if you're in America, I think one more side trend I think we'll be seeing a little bit is almost a move back to suburbia. Um, if you've been here, there's a move to the cities now in the last 10 years. Everybody moved into the cities, and I think now you might see a little bit move back into the suburbia because people like larger plots of land now that everybody's being locked down.
Thank you, Mani.
Yep.
Hi, Mani. I would like to just follow up on the previous question. In terms of employee productivity, has Akamai seen an increase of productivity when employees work from home against perhaps a 9 to 5 setting in the office?
Yes, and that surprised me. I was actually ready for an employee dip in productivity, but then all the statistics started coming in. It became very evident that there's at least a 5-10% productivity gain, um, because of no commutes and people are working. And sometimes people are burning themselves out because they're working all the time. We started doing a few things. So one of the things that we started doing at least was we started piloting the concept of no Friday afternoon meetings. And we haven't rolled this company wide, but like I started doing this for my organization, which is a third of the company, where we said we will not do Friday afternoon meetings, regardless of your geography, which means if you're in India, you pretty much don't have a Friday meeting at all with anybody in the US. And so it's a way to alleviate situations like burnout that are happening with employees. Which goes to James's earlier point. I don't know if he'll go back to the old situation because when I speak to a lot of people in India and Bangalore, nobody wants to sit in that taxi for 2-3 hours to get into an office. That's just lost time. It's not time that's been useful for work or for family. So productivity is actually increasing. The question always for us has been longer term, how does that productivity look? Because short term, a lot of the work that we had kicked off last year, if you're in operation mode, you can easily do it from home. But in order to create innovative new products, you need that face-to-face contact, the brainstorming. If that's not possible, just productivity doesn't help. So we have to figure out how to get that to happen in the long term. So it's a short-term gain, but it could lead to long-term um, pain if it's not handled correctly.
Thank you, Mani.
Yep.
Mani, conversely, if an employee does not have structure and therefore his or her time gets controlled by someone else, how would Akamai manage that so that the employee, compartmentalizes his time, for breaks, for meals, and especially for folks who work regionally or in customer service, one can easily be consumed into a situation and lose track of that. And then related to that, what is Akamai doing in terms of helping employees with mental health? Because we're not sure about the long-term implications of working from home in a different environment and different dynamics.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'd say a lot of my answers, if I were to confess to you that I knew the answers to all of it, I'd be lying because there's a lot of unknowns here, and I think we're also kind of going through this motion as a company. we've taken the lead in terms of offering things like, mental health resources, training. We have an employee assistance program where employees can go when they have specific concerns. We kind of saw a lot of questions coming into that on how to handle things like this. So I think our approach has been an openness to communication, and that's the HR plan, right? They are leading that by openly communicating about where they are, by openly listening to employee feedback. Our CEO has conducted a number of town halls. We are basically doing town halls every month with every single office to get their feedback. So it's an opportunity for people to talk and be listened to. From a technology standpoint, I am actually I like the technology, and I'm seeing that there's an ecosystem of companies that are now coming up with products just so that we can handle things like this. So, good example, just like you see clothing, what we're seeing in the US is a lot of our clothing companies now started making masks. A lot of the liquor companies started making hand sanitizers. Like that, you're seeing a lot of tech companies adapt and get ready for things that handle mental health and productivity within employees. And so, a bunch of new apps have come from a lot of different vendors that are doing these things. Even large companies, even Akamai actually, a lot of our pivot has been towards our enterprise application product, which helps people work remotely, right? So you see that companies are adapting and pivoting. I believe fundamentally that humans are are endowed with incredible ingenuity. When you have a crisis, people make the best use of it to try to adapt to that crisis. And I think we'll see an influx of tools. One of the tools that I've just saw that we plan to look at is a tool called Miro. Never heard of it before coronavirus hit, but Miro offers the ability to do um, remote agile development and remote whiteboarding. So it's something that we were looking at. So these are tools that suddenly you see in the market that now help you in a situation like this. And I think things will change consistently. Again, if you ask me to do this presentation in 6 months, I think I'll have something else because of a whole bunch of new things that have come up within the ecosystem.
Thanks, Mani. Any other questions?
Hi, Mani. It's Toby Kwan here. I'd like to get your thoughts on when we talk about the new normal, and you might have more flexibility between people working from home and working in the office, hiring people in more remote locations. How do you deal with having a coherent company culture where you have people who might be seeing, say, more colleagues or more leadership in person and face to face, and sometimes it's much easier to communicate company culture and values and how to do things. When it's face to face, you can see body languages and see facial expressions much clearly. How do you think you can deal with that going forward?
It is going to be a challenge, Toby. I will confess it's going to be a challenge. I feel that remote tools like this are helping us quite a bit. We are able to, we've obviously given guidelines to people to join on video as much as possible. We haven't mandated it, but we've recommended highly that people join on video so that people can see the body language. We have also trying to over communicate. So as an example, when we were all in the office, the way the CEO communicated to employees was using a quarterly all hands. But now almost every month we are doing an impromptu event. Something like this, just a few slides, but getting time from employees to talk to their executive team. So something that previously they might never have known who the CIO was, now they get to see get to see me on WebEx and have the opportunity to ask me anything. So in some ways, that's actually new for a lot of employees. They've never had that opportunity before, and now they suddenly see that. So that we also use a community system within the company. We have a community where people can post different things. So just given the events that have happened in the US, our HR officer, who's African American, posted his views on it, which now have got over, I don't know, 1,000 views or 2,000 views. Just people are really, really clamoring to get any information they can. So I'd say it's a mix. People are now going to the resources that they have, the resources that are at their disposal, which is technology, to try to relate to the company. But I think we're also trying to stress the fact that it's important that people use these tools, use chat, use communities to connect with employees, as opposed to assuming that employees can see and hear and feel everything. Even meetings, I've noticed that even when I start off a meeting, it used to be, okay, tell me what you've done today. What is your plan for the week? And now we start off by saying, how are you doing? Are you safe? Are you healthy? How are the kids doing? How are they handling school? Just like the conversation we had before we started this. You see more of that that's happening. It's not a substitute. It is never going to be a substitute for an in-person conversation. But given the situation, I think we are slowly seeing that happen. I don't know about Singapore as much, but I'd say in the US, the other thing, I probably went through a decade without knowing who my neighbors were, right? Like why did I have to know them? I wake up at 5 o'clock, take the train to work. I come back at 6, 7 o'clock. I eat my dinner. It's dark. It's cold, and I'm done. But now, I get to see the children playing nearby. Like that's the stuff you get to know who they are. Changing dynamics, very, very interesting dynamic changes, I feel.
Yeah, thanks, Manny. I suppose it's probably very similar over here. I think here in Singapore, I live in an apartment building. So as you say, during the day, everybody's out to work and nobody sees each other. But now, everybody's stuck at home. When people have to go out for a jog or anything, people bump each other. So yeah, definitely more opportunities to get to know people that way.
So I have a question for you then, Toby, because I know how it is in the US. As many of you who've come here, many of us live in homes in suburbia. We have plots of land. So for us, the impact has been reasonably minimal. But I believe it must be quite hard being in an apartment, which is what most of Singapore is. How have Singaporeans handled it?
That's okay. That's a great question, because I think if you ask 100 people, you get 100 different answers, because the reality is when people are, in an apartment rather than a home, then it depends on their own personal circumstances, how big that apartment is, how many people live there. I'm very lucky. I have a fairly spacious place for the size of family I'm in. I only have one small child, so I don't have to fight with him for computer time, for quiet time or anything. But I have colleagues who have 4 kids at home, and they're fighting over who gets to use the computer, tablets. The internet gets overloaded for them, and they all have to try to find space to carry on their classroom or their work activity. So yeah, so I think it's a very mixed experience for people here.
Got it.
So any other questions? If not, can I ask James, our president, to maybe say a few words to close out this event?
Thanks everyone for joining. This is our first attempt at doing a virtual event. I mean, the club is really a social club, and we haven't done anything for about 4 or 5 months now. We've also had to delay our AGM. Normally we would give a small token of appreciation to our guests. So we're wondering how to do that virtually. We may resort to a physical gift and mail it to Mani. So I see. I think this has been very helpful, and thank you very much again, Mani, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you again for inviting me, James and Ching Su and everybody else. Maybe next time I'm in Singapore, I will take you up on the social aspect of what the club is all about. So thank you again for having me today. It's a fun conversation.
Okay. Yeah, and good night to everyone else.
Okay.
Thank you, Mani. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
Manny.
night.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Good night.
Bye. Hi, everyone.